But where it starts is with your partner. If you have someone with you at home, it starts with your child's grandparents, your in-laws, any really close family that you're around often. Start with those dinner table conversations or around the couch conversations, whatever makes sense for your family. Be specific, don't be vague.
Welcome to the Attuned Spectrum podcast. I'm Chantal Hewitt, an ADHD mum, experienced educator, and autism support coach who understands your path because I also walk it daily. This is your space for real conversations that empower your autistic child, yourself, and your family to thrive. Here, we respect neurodiversity, cheer on advocacy, and leave judgment at the door. Join me inside this week's episode.
Hello, and welcome back to the Attuned Spectrum podcast. This is episode number 3. I have called this episode 4 Simple Steps to Confident Autism Advocacy. And I'm pairing this right back to advocacy in its simplest form. And for me, that's where it starts. So it does not start in those school meetings. It doesn't start with speaking to people at a grocery store when your child is in a meltdown or is very dysregulated and you're just trying to make it through that and explain to the person there what is going on. But where it starts is with your partner. If you have someone with you at home, it starts with your child's grandparents, your in-laws, and that close family that you're around often. So that's usually the biggest hurdles in advocacy and really getting that strength to, or that courage to speak up. Advocacy is something that keeps a lot of parents that I work with up at night, and it shouldn't. And I'm hoping that from this episode, you can gain a different perspective to shift your own thinking around how to confidently advocate for your child. And let's just dive right on in. So this is for you if you have ever felt your heart racing before a school meeting or a family dinner, or if you left a conversation just feeling like you didn't explain well enough the needs of your child, overthinking everything, wish that you could find the right words to help others see your child the way that you do. Let's reframe advocacy. I know when I think about advocacy, I think about a lot of political things going on in the world, and that's definitely a part of it, but I'm talking about bringing it right back to your home and to your close circle. And I also think that I was quite anxious around being an advocate for my child because I didn't want to offend anyone. I wanted to keep the peace and I didn't want to come across as being rude, which sometimes I do still feel like I do. So that advocacy shift within myself, that's something that I'm still working on. And it is a practice, but it's something that you can build. And over time, it does get so much easier once you trust that confidence that you're creating. Here are those 4 actionable steps to being a confident advocate. So you start with the child's story. That's number 1. We don't go into the statistics. Number 2 is you educate from a strength-based perspective, not a deficit. Number 3 is making specific, doable requests. And number 4, and this is a biggie, is teach your child to self-advocate. By the end of this episode, if you stick around, and I truly hope that you do, you will have practical tools that will support you in being a confident and courageous advocate for your autistic child. So let's just jump into step number 1. So starting with their story, not statistics. And please vary your audience with this. You will know who you're talking to best. If there's limited understanding of autism, then this is where it's really important. But if they do know quite a lot, the person that you're speaking to or the people, then by all means, you can add in anything that you want. But the reason why stories work is they create that connection. So again, bringing everything back to connection. And if the person you're speaking to knows the child, it just brings it into their world. So you're explaining what's happening in your child's world, and it's just a bit easier for them to understand than that clinical jargon. An example is sensory sensitivities and explaining an analogy for the people that you're speaking with. If your child has sensitive hearing, if they are quite overstimulated by loud noises that other people might perceive as not loud at all, what you can say is an analogy. This is all about reframing the language. So when we think of a child who is hypersensitive to noise, we could say, hey, do you know when you see nails scraping on a chalkboard and how that feels in your body, unless they don't feel that way. But that is quite a universal example where you'll get the reaction of, oh, yeah, I don't like that. And that's what you can take. You can take that understanding and say, well, that's how my child feels when the music is too loud in the background, for example. So this is all about the language reframe as well. So instead of saying, my child's not being difficult, you could say, these bright lights really cause her physical pain. Can you see? So pointing to things that that are tangible in their eyes. So can you see how she's closed up and she's rocking on the floor? She's trying to soothe herself. She's trying to regulate because the lights are too much. So you're giving an actual example of what they can see and actually making the link. Because sometimes if a grandparent or an aunt or an uncle or a teacher, anyone that you're trying to have these conversations with, if the people that you're speaking to don't live in the home with you where the child feels the safest and can unmask most of the time, or that's my assumption in this example, is that they're unmasking, their guards are down, their nervous system has more room to be itself and to show how it's feeling. So if they don't experience that with you on a daily basis, then they will not be able to connect A to B. So this is why framing it this way is so helpful, especially if the child is there. So not that you ever want to see your child upset, and you need to be there, of course, in those moments for your child. Even afterwards, once your child is calm and regulated, you can pull that person aside and say, did you see what happened in that situation? This is why it happened. And then they can make the links that way. Some other examples I would get all the time, your son, I think he's ignoring us. What I used to say was, he's not ignoring you, he's autistic. And that came from a place of, anger and being defensive. But instead, what I started saying was, he isn't ignoring you. His brain is actually really deep into his interest right now or into his play. When he's ready, he will respond to you. And it's just really hard to pull him out of that. So I started describing what it was like for my child in a positive way. Another example is, instead of saying, she's not antisocial, you can say, well, we're in a large space right now. Maybe you're at a shopping center or a market, and large groups overwhelm her nervous system. So she's not being antisocial. She's actually just doing what she needs, and she's enjoying her time by herself or with her sibling or with a friend or with mom, dad, caregiver, whoever's there. Okay, let's take a pause. And if you listen to episode 1 and 2, you might see a recurring pattern. This is a thing. If you don't want to participate, please know you just skip ahead. But I do hope that you do participate in the pause moments. They're quick and they can be really insightful. So have a think about one aspect that others struggle to understand about your child. And once you have that, whether write it down, think about it, how do you normally respond? How do you feel when they struggle to understand that about your child? And what is one thing that you could do differently when this happens again? Okay, welcome back from your mini journaling session, a reflection. Just to recap, actionable step 1, when you start with a story, you are not asking for people to accommodate a problem. You're asking them to understand a real person. And I think that's where the change is so meaningful. So I hope that step was helpful for you. We're going to move on to step number 2, and that is educating from strength, not from deficit. So the main point here is that deficit-based education, where you've got a tick list and you're saying, they're not making eye contact, they're not making friends, they don't listen to me, they're ignoring me, they're not speaking the way that I need them to, or they're not communicating in that way. That's a deficit framework. We're looking at this awesome, amazing child. Your child is someone who is broken, and they're not. They don't need fixing. They need a strength framework that supports them. They need to be seen as having differences in their development and their learning, and they deserve support. Because remember, they're living in a world where the environments are not made for them. So that's where it's up to us as their advocates to make sure that we construct and co-construct really positive experiences for them through our confident advocacy. So I just want to reframe a few examples that are quite common. Social connection. Instead of thinking, or other people thinking, they're having trouble with their social interactions, instead, you can focus on the way that their brain works. So Instead of saying that they have trouble with social interaction, you can instead say that they connect really deeply with the things that they're passionate about, with their intense interests. They have incredible loyalty to their friends. Just with a few tweaks to the words that you use, you can shift the whole scene from a deficit to a strength. And that is what your child needs. So, looking at attention to detail, a lot of people, especially within education or the healthcare system, they say that an autistic child has sensory processing issues. My issue here is with the word issues. These are differences. And the reason why they are issues is because they are disabled by our neurotypical society. Okay, so it's the environment, it's our neurotypical built society that does not work for an autistic brain. So they are disabled by society. They themselves, their brain is not disabled, if that makes sense. Need for predictability. Instead of saying, my child really struggles with transitions, you could reframe it in a strength based way of saying, my child really thrives off routine and predictability, and they are at their best. Their nervous system feels the safest and is regulated when they know what to expect. How can we shift the environment to make that supportive of them and knowing that that is a need that they have? And a last example here is honesty and authenticity, which is huge for autistic children and adults. This value, this sense of justice. What that can look like sometimes is that they don't understand social rules. And I should say social rules for those listening and not watching the video. I have quoted social rules because those are normative social rules that aren't actually helpful for your autistic child or an autistic person. So if you are met with the sentence of, oh, this child, your child, doesn't understand the social rules or the social norms, you could instead say, oh, well, my child really values honesty and authenticity over social conventions that we're all familiar with. It doesn't necessarily mean that if anyone is being rude or, not behaving civilized to someone, that's a different conversation. So I think what's really important here is the balance. So we need to be really careful because obviously I'm speaking very strength-based, but within that we do not deny the challenges that autistic children or our autistic children and the adults that we may know in the community, how they struggle. It's not that we're looking at it through a deficit lens, but we are honoring the struggle that is real, but is really tricky to understand. Long story short, we focus on advocating from a strength-based perspective, so neuroaffirming ways, but we don't discredit the child's struggles and the differences in the child's struggles. So I will use a quick personal example, something that has always been so frustrating to me, and I still have to work on it because it comes up a lot, because my autistic boy is quite fluent in his speaking and his speech is very clear. He's only 5, and a lot of the times it sounds like I'm speaking to a 15-year-old. What I get met with a lot is, and I'm even looking at my notes because this was very important for me to write down, what I get is, I didn't even realize he was autistic because you can't see it. He just must have a touch of autism. His autism can't be that severe because look, he's playing with a friend. Those are just a few examples, but they are infuriating to myself and my husband, who see his real struggles in his emotional regulation, in his mental well-being, his mental health, every single day. And he masks. He's a high masking child, and that's something that we're also working to support as well. But because of that, he is perceived one way by so many other people. And in the home, he just completely loses it. And I'm sure that so many people can relate to that. So you are not alone. Yeah, I just wanted to put that out there for you. In my advocacy journey, I used to get, and to be honest, still do at times, quite frustrated when that comment would come up. And my response, I've had to script this for myself so I don't get off track. But what I say is, my son is autistic. He masks in public, and we see a lot of different things at home. So he does really struggle in his emotional regulation. And that usually either continues a conversation or kind of stops someone in their tracks. And I hope in those conversations they don't come across rude. But again, I really have to bring it back to, what is the purpose of this conversation? It is to advocate for my child who is still learning to advocate for themselves, which actually brings me to a really big point, is the whole big picture here about why parent or caregiver advocacy is so important is because your child is still learning to advocate for themselves. they're a child. This might sound a bit harsh, and I know that so many people will care about your child, but no one will care and advocate as much as their parent or parents. So that's why it is essential that even if you feel uncomfortable with advocacy and how you educate others on your child's support needs, how to modify the environment, everything is so important that you really get confident with it, because you will have to do it a lot. I won't lie to you. It is a regular part of my day, but you do get good at it. And I find, especially when I say something that's obviously very child appropriate in front of my child, he is really receptive to it. Like, I can actually feel his connection more. I can feel him ease. He knows that I have his back. And while that's uncomfortable for me, I always bring it to, my gosh, how uncomfortable and how upsetting would this be for him? Okay, I do have a pause here. Have a think, just take a moment and reflect on how you feel about what I've just said. I'm wanting to know, so please put in the comments or keep it to yourself, but I want to know where you're at in feeling like a confident advocate. Do you feel like you can do all these things, or do they still create this barrier where you are a bit fearful of what other people might say? And why? I want to know why. Okay, welcome back from your reflection. I hope that was insightful for you. Now, let's go to actionable step number 3, which is make specific, doable requests. And my main point here is this is where most conversations or plans fall apart, because there's this incredible conversation that happens, but then the actionable step is either too elaborate, there's too many steps, people forget, they're not written down. So this is why having a specific, actionable step and then even regularly coming back to it and evaluating how it goes is really helpful. Anything that's too vague becomes overwhelming. Specific becomes manageable and trackable for the people who are supporting your child. So, with the goal of transforming vague into specific, here are a few examples. Being vague would be saying, please be understanding about my child's sensory needs. More specific is, when my child is overwhelmed and puts his hands over his ears, please offer a 5-minute break in a quieter space. Obviously, that's a little bit generic, so you would have to use that framework and then make it work for your child. For example, they might need visuals put in place. They might need someone to support them in making that decision for themselves if they're struggling to make sense of everything going on. Another example that is vague is, my daughter learns differently. So more specific is, could my daughter have written instructions alongside verbal instructions? She also needs a lot more processing time to ask questions. Could you make sure that you don't jump ahead too much in the lesson or come back to something so she has time to process? I just added on a bit there, but hopefully you can make sense of that difference between vague and specific and make it work if that works for your child. Last example is, please support my child's sensory needs. So again, we need to be specific. You can say, my child focuses best using noise reducing headphones during independent work. So hopefully you can see how those things just make it easier for the people who are working to support your child, and for yourself too. You know what to come back to, what to measure, what to evaluate, and how to move forward. Okay, pause moment. If it makes sense for you right now, think about one situation where you need or where you want to strengthen advocacy for your child. Do you have it? Once you do, now have a think of what specific, doable action would really make a difference. Okay, welcome back from your reflection. There's only one more step left. And also props to you if you've made it through all 3 reflections so far. Please skip ahead if they don't make sense to you. That is completely fine. I don't pause for too long. Okay, step number 4, teach the child. Teach your child to self-advocate. This is huge because this sets them up in the long run, supports their well-being, their self-esteem, their confidence, and it empowers them. It gives them autonomy. It fills that autonomy bucket that I was telling you about. For those watching the video, I've just done this. This is my autonomy bucket for my child. My main point here is how important it is to teach your child to understand their own needs and then communicate their own needs. Because eventually, they will need your support a little bit less, or perhaps they will continue to need their support. I know I'm talking to a whole range of parents here who have varying support needs for their children. So adjust this point to suit you and your needs. But if you have a speaking child or a non-speaking child or someone who has limited speech, they still will communicate. So why this matters is that you are their advocate now and you're their teacher now. You're their parent, you're their caregiver. Teaching self-advocacy, whether they can fully absorb that or not as they become an adult, that is a skill that they're going to have for life. And you get to shape that. And that is pretty special. So an example of a young child, I'm talking 2, 3 years old, their early years, really early years. It is so important to help them understand, and even before understanding, to help them recognize what their needs are and their emotions and their feelings, which even a neurotypical or typically quoted developing child, they don't understand a huge array of the emotions. They have happy, sad, angry, frustrated. It's a lot for them to grasp, for any child to grasp. So if we pair it right back of in the early years using, and you can script this, you can write it down. This is the exact language that I use. I say, I notice that you seem overwhelmed, or I notice that you seem sad. What would help? I notice that this is hard to you. What part is most difficult? So you're validating how they're feeling. You can even throw in, and I actually recommend that you throw in, I've just kept this very short for the attention span or understanding of a child that age. You can also say, I notice that you seem overwhelmed. I think this because you've just thrown your toy down that you've been working so hard on. How can I help? So the idea here is that you are helping your young child to understand how they're feeling and then to understand their response to that feeling. And that ties into that emotional regulation. Quick tip, if you use visuals or if you're thinking about using visuals, having some visuals handy if your child becomes overwhelmed or if they're feeling a really intense feeling that they can't name, is you can have different pictures on the visuals that relate to the child, so something that they can do at home or even pictures of themselves in their home or in a safe place. And if they are trying to communicate how they're feeling, you can say, can you point? Can you show me? Is it this one? An example with my son, although he's a fluent speaker, he is non-speaking when he is in shutdown. And the way that we support him is we bring in the visuals during that time. We don't put the extra pressure on his brain, his nervous system, and he prefers to communicate that way, and that is fully respected. And an example of an older child teaching them to self-advocate. If you notice, or the teacher notices that they actually work better or learn better when they're walking around the class, you teach your child to communicate that, and they still might need you as well. Just because they're over the age of 5, they definitely will still need you. And then you bring that back into helping them understand that, okay, I just wanted to share a bit of a celebration moment or a success story about my own child and his advocacy that we've been working on for quite some time. My boy is 5. He's just turned 5, and he needs to jump. He needs that proprioceptive input to help regulate his body. We have a trampoline, of course, when it's raining. He also is quite sensitive to feeling wet and he doesn't want to go outside. So he started jumping on the couch the other day, which in our home is very acceptable because we recognize that that's how he regulates his body. But he actually said to me for the first time, he said, Mama, my body really needs to jump right now and it's raining outside. So even though he didn't express that he wanted to go on the trampoline, I definitely could read between the lines there. And gosh, I was just so proud that he knew his needs. And I know that all the work that my husband and I and his teacher and our family has been doing to support him, to have his voice and to advocate for his needs has been really helpful. It's all kind of just starting to show up now. So if you're in the space of not seeing those celebratory moments, please know that they will come. They might not look like that. They will look different because every child is different. Okay, wrapping up now. These 4 steps, they build on each other. So if you feel like the self-advocacy, teaching self-advocacy is far away, don't stress, don't worry, just start where you're at. Start with those dinner table conversations or around the couch conversations, whatever makes sense for your family. Be specific. Don't be vague. Specific is measurable. It's so important. Acknowledge and validate your child and what they're feeling. And remember to start small. So if you are nervous about being your child's advocate, practice with your partner, practice with a friend, jump on over to our community, our Connection First community, and practice there with someone who really gets it and might be in the same position as you. I will tag that community link below. Just wanted to throw that in there. It felt like it made sense. Just a reminder, you know your child better than anyone, whether that's their teacher, whether that's the principal, whether that's your in-laws, whether that's anyone. You are their person. You know your child, and you are their greatest advocate. And there's a ripple effect because every time that you speak up, you are not just helping them, even though that's your goal, but you are actually setting things up in their minds, in their environment, and making shifts for them as they grow as a neurodivergent child, an autistic child, and you're setting them up for success. And I think that's really powerful. And yeah, so just trust yourself. Practical next steps. So I didn't have a pause this time, so maybe this can be it. But have a think. What is one thing that you could do in the next week or even just today? Start small, start today. One practical next step that will support your child's advocacy or that will support you becoming a confident advocate for your child. And if you've liked this episode, please tune in next week. We are going to be jumping right into signs of autistic burnout in children. This is a huge topic. It is often very misunderstood. It is still being learned about, and it is frequently missed, but it is essential to address. I know I mentioned this a few minutes ago, but I properly want to invite you now. We are building a community of Connection First parents. Please head on over to chantelhewitt.com/community to grab your founding member rate. We cannot wait to see you inside. This is your daily encouragement, your daily space for community and connection with people who really understand your daily life of raising your autistic child and all the beauty and confusion that a lot of the times comes with that. We cannot wait to see you there.
Thank you so much for allowing me into your world today. Wherever you are around the globe, if you like what you've heard, I would be so grateful if you would click that subscribe button and comment below to tell me one thing. What support do you need? This helps me create episodes that truly impact our shared community. By commenting, you not only help yourself, but you help make modern, neurodiversity-affirming autism support accessible to those who are searching for a better parenting approach that actually feels good. I'm Chantel, and I'll see you next week.